Hello and welcome to Fishbourne Primary School. If you're watching this film, you are probably one of our volunteers who comes into school on a regular basis and who we've asked to complete safeguarding training. We ran this session in school last week for volunteers to take part in. We had 30 people in attendance, which was amazing. We're aware, though, that not everybody was able to come to that event. And so in order for you to understand your role in safeguarding during your time at our school, we have also filmed the training, which is a little bit different to the training that takes place in school because a lot of that is based around talk and discussion and questions and answers. But we really hope that this training will help you to understand your role in school. If you have any questions as a result of watching this training, please do get in touch and let us know what your questions are so that we can support you in understanding your role. My name is Naomi Day and I am fortunate enough to be the head teacher of this amazing school, and part of my role is the designated safeguarding lead. So if you ever have any questions or concerns, then I'm your first port of call in school to come and have a chat with. We're going to make our way through a series of slides this morning, and there will be times when we stop the film and ask you to think about something, jot down your reflections. So there will be a bit of interaction during that time, but you will need to stop the film and restart it at those moments. Okay, so I'm going to now attempt to share my screen with you. It's been a little while since we did this online learning, so you may need to bear with me a little bit. Okay. There we go. Great. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is just share with you what the key objectives are for this session. So the first of these is, for many of you, it will be about refreshing. Some of you will be your first introduction to increase your awareness of the responsibilities you have as a volunteer at Fishbourne Primary School to safeguard the children in our care. It's also about you understanding our safeguarding policy, which is available on our school website, and the protocols we have in school, and also to look at keeping children safe in education, which is a document that is published, a statutory piece of guidance from the DfE and updated each year in September. We're also going to ensure that you have a confidence in your role in school. And one of the best ways to describe your role is using our 5 R's, that you understand how to recognise possible abuse, how to respond appropriately, how to refer your concerns, how to record any observations or a disclosure that may have been made, and the importance of reflecting carefully after having an experience relating to safeguarding. Now, the first thing we did in our training session last week is to watch a short film that is available on 2 platforms, on YouTube and also on the TED Talk platform. And the talk is called The Power of Everyday Heroes. I highly recommend you spending 10 minutes watching this film because it is a really powerful reminder of how important our safeguarding role in schools is. Every year we share this film with our staff team, with our volunteers, because it's just such a helpful reminder. As a summary of that film, I'm going to share with you some of the key messages that Jazz, who's the lady in this picture, shares. Jazz is an educator. She had a background of growing up in the care system, and she shares some very powerful messages about how important the role school was in saving her. These are some of the things that she said about school. School meant everything to me. It wasn't the rescue that had the impact for me. It was the fact that he, meaning her teacher, cared and he stood up for me. They held a vision of success. They asked me how I was every single day. He teacher, waited for me to try. He stood there and smiled the biggest smile. These adults enabled a broken little girl to become me. They believed in me. Such powerful messages about the impact that school had on Jazz and her siblings. So important that we all recognise the role that we play, whether we're teachers, learning support assistants, premises staff, administration staff, volunteers, governors, any role in school, we each have our part to play in safeguarding. And that takes us to our key principle, that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. And that in order for it to be effective, each professional and organisation, and I'd like to add in there, volunteers within the organisation should play their full part. They should know how to play their full part. They should be trained to be able to play their full part. And that is why we put this training on, because it's so key to keeping our children safe. Underneath the training, there are a number of documents that you need to be aware of. And one of those documents we ask you to have read specifically. So there are two key documents that we work using in school. One is the Working Together to Safeguard Children. And that is a document that is used by all partners who are involved in working with children. So that's social care, the police, schools, health. A more specific document relates to those working in educational settings from nursery all the way through to post-16, and that's called Keeping Children Safe in Education. This document is published every year and it has a number of updates in, and we will be sharing some of those updates. There is a requirement on all people working in education to have read part 1 of this guidance. It is around 40 pages long. We've got copies in school if you value a paper copy over reading it online, but if you want to find it online, you can just simply Google Keeping Children Safe in Education 2022 and find the information that you need there. The content of this piece of statutory guidance is here. The bit that we require everybody to have read is the safeguarding information for all staff. Some of the other parts are less relevant to all members of staff. But it is important that our staff and volunteers have read and understand that legislation to know how it impacts on their duty to safeguard our children at Fishbourne Primary School. Okay, so moving on, just to make you aware, there are many other documents that sit alongside Keeping Children Safe in Education, and here is just an example of them. We dip into these in school all of the time as we continue to train our staff team. They're really interesting documents. They're worth having a look at if you have a particular interest in a certain part of safeguarding. Before we move into the updates of Keeping Children Safe in Education 2022, there were a number of updates in 2021 that were particularly significant to our staff team, and we thought it'd be helpful just to revisit some of those for the benefit of all of our team. There was an introduction of this concept of low-level concerns relating to staff behaviour. I'm going to use the word staff and volunteer interchangeably. If I use the word staff, it means that I'm also referring to volunteers, so I apologise if I don't always say volunteers. These were some of the things that we talked at length about as a staff team. So being over-friendly with children, thinking about what that looks like, thinking about the way that we conduct ourselves. Relationships are a real strength at Fishbourne Primary School. When you come into school, you will notice the positive relationship that staff have with children. We need to be really mindful about not allowing that to become over-friendly with children. We need to keep that level of professionalism in the way that we conduct ourselves. And to be mindful about having favourites or behaving in a way with a particular child that might be perceived by other children as you having favourites. That's quite difficult for volunteers sometimes because we direct you to work with particular children, and it may look to others as though you have favourites when you come into school. And that's why we try to vary the groupings when you come in, so you read with different children over time. Engaging with a child on a one-to-one basis in a secluded area or behind a closed door. That's something that some of our volunteers have asked us to clarify a little bit more about in terms of where it's okay for them to hear readers. As much as possible, we encourage you to be in our open areas of school, which include places like outside the Year 4-5 classroom, in the staff room, in the library area, just trying to make sure that you're somewhere where you don't find yourself on your own with a child. And that's as much about protecting you as it is protecting a child. Using inappropriate, sexualized, intimidating or offensive behaviour, and also taking photographs of children. And that's something that we have a very clear rule in school about, that we don't do that. And as a volunteer in school, there would be no reason for you needing to take a photograph with a child. So it's a no mobile phones, no photographs rule in school. That's very clear for everybody. If you've got any questions about any of those things, don't hesitate to just pop in and ask them. We'll do our best to support with explaining anything any further. So moving into Keeping Children Safe in Education 2022, there are a number of updates. I'm not going to read through all of them here now, but you could pause this film and have a read through each of these boxes. I think the key boxes really for drawing your attention to as volunteers, actually it's already in bold, but it's the attitude that we need to have in school, that it could happen here, that there could be safeguarding concerns, and indeed, sadly, there are safeguarding concerns in school for many of our children. It's important that you don't come to school thinking, oh, it's Fishbourne Primary School, oh, it's such a lovely village, oh, it's located on the harbour. Nothing like that would happen in Fishbourne. We have to believe that any incident of abuse could happen at Fishbourne Primary School for the children who attend our school. It's not our job to judge whether it has or hasn't happened, and we will come on to that some more later. But we do have to have the attitude that it could happen here. So please pause the film here and just have a read through the other boxes. Okay, I mentioned in our objectives for today that we would be focusing on these 5 R's. If you've attended training before, you may think, oh, I'm sure there were 4 R's before, and indeed that is the case. There were 4 R's before. We have now moved in to having 5 R's. So we've got the recognising a possible sign that abuse may be taking place, responding to it in an appropriate way, referring it to the right people, recording accurately, and reflecting carefully. We're going to take each of those R's now, and for many of them there'll be a case study that goes alongside it for us to learn more about what those 5 R's mean to you as a volunteer at Fishbourne Primary School. So we're going to start off by looking for recognising signs. Okay, now these are some of the current causes for concern for safeguarding that come up in places of education. You can see here there are a significant number of possible abuse scenarios for children attending school, and many things for us to be thinking about as a school community. All of those areas fall into 4 main types of abuse: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse or sexual exploitation, and neglect. Those are the 4 umbrella terms that all the previous bubbles fit into. What we're going to do now is we're going to focus on a case study. We are going to listen to this lady called Sally, who is a worker at the Children and Family Centre. And as you listen to Sally speaking, I want you to just think about what you feel the possible signs and indicators of abuse there are in terms of what she's saying. Remember that those signs can be either physical or behavioural, or about the way in which the parent or carer responds to the child. After you've finished listening, we're going to look at a number of possible things, and what we're going to do is ask you to identify the things that you think Sally may have talked about that are significant. We get on fine with the families here. I don't want to rock the boat, but I do have a few concerns. It's not been easy for the family lately. Money's really tight for them. Dad's left a dozen times, always comes back. They live in an old flat. It should have been pulled down, really. She's white and he's Jamaican. Seems to me she's taking it all out on the girl. She really walloped her one last week when she was picking her up from nursery, and today she's got these red marks all down one leg. If the other mums here I've been on the phone to social services, it'll be a real uphill struggle to get them to come back. Now I'd like you just to have a look at this list. And from the list, I want you to just see if you can identify what you feel the possible signs and indicators of abuse are. Okay, so we're now going to share with you the what we feel the particular possible signs and indicators of abuse are. So the following things stood out for the people who came to the training. The observation that a member of staff has seen mum taking things out on their child. The observation that the child had been walloped last week. And the observation that the child has marks left behind on her leg. Those are the three indicators of possible abuse. The other things in the list are other pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that may or may not support the fact that that child might be coming from somewhere where the child is struggling, but none of them are signs that a child is being abused. And there are a couple of things that are completely irrelevant. So, for example, the fact that mum's white and dad's Jamaican has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not a child is being abused. The fact that things haven't been easy for them lately doesn't suggest that a child's going to be abused. One of the concerns that came out in our safeguarding training that was a huge concern for our volunteers was some of the comments that Sally makes about not wanting to refer on because she doesn't want to rock the boat. We're going to be talking a little more later in the training about some of the things that put people off making a referral. We cannot allow anything to put people off making referrals. We can't put a relationship that we have with a family ahead of the needs of a child. And that's going to be something we'll explore a little bit more in future slides. Okay, so we're going to move on now to to responding appropriately. Okay, so this is the way that we behave if a child says, I would like to talk to you about something. So as a volunteer coming to school, you may very well find that over time you build a really lovely relationship with a group of children. We see it all the time in school. It's really lovely because you have that little bit of extra time to be able to talk to children. I hear many of you, when the child comes out to work with you, you say to them, oh, how are you? How's your week been? What have you been up to? And it might very well be, as the child starts talking to you, that you start to think, oh gosh, I feel like this child's making a disclosure. There are some things that they've said that make me feel concerned. And it's really important, if that happens, we respond in an appropriate way to what the child is saying. And we've got some golden rules about that. So these are the do's. Stay approachable, and we know that you're brilliant at that as volunteers. Remain calm. So don't go into a panic if you think, oh my goodness, the child's making a disclosure. What am I going to say? Use the time to listen carefully and be mindful about not being critical of what the child is saying. Don't rush them, let them talk at their own pace. As they talk, listen to them and take what they say seriously. If you're unsure about something they've said, it's perfectly okay to clarify what you've heard. Reassure them. Tell the child what will happen next. Without any delay at all, you need to find one of our designated safeguarding leads in school. As I've already said, I am the key designated safeguarding lead in school, but sometimes you may find I'm not around. If that's the case, we've got 2 deputy designated safeguarding leads. One of those is Catherine Williams, who's our assistant head teacher and year 6 teacher, and the other is Emily Harris, who is also an assistant head teacher, and she's our early years teacher. If neither of those people are available, the next port of call is your class teacher. We will then ask you to write down what the child has said, and we're going to do some work on that in our recording section of this training, so don't worry about that too much at the moment. There are also some golden rules about things not to do. So don't ask any probing questions. It's not your job to investigate what the child has said. So we said that it would be appropriate to clarify information, so something the child said, just to make sure that you've understood properly, but not to investigate. Don't try and resolve it. Don't give the child advice about what to do. Don't make any negative comments about the situation. Really important not to promise confidentiality. Okay, it's important that you say what's going to happen next, that you're going to talk to somebody else in school who will be able to help, will know what to do to help. And as you walk away, don't make assumptions about what has happened. It's really important that we all understand that it isn't our role to judge. And that's really tricky, isn't it? But it's important. There are professionals out there who we will refer on to, and it is their job to investigate. It's their job to resolve and to identify what the next steps for that family are. So we're going to have a go now at thinking about how we might respond to Jacey. We're going to listen to another disclosure, and I want you to think, okay, if I was in that position and Jacey was talking to me as a volunteer at school, what would I say after she had finished talking? So put yourself in this position. You're a member of staff, a volunteer who volunteered to help at a girls' football team after school on a Wednesday in the local park. Jacey is a new player and she's very small for her age. You've tried talking to her during the session, but she's very jumpy. She keeps her head down whenever anyone speaks to her. She really comes to life though on the football pitch. She's very quick and skillful. Since Jacey's been on the football team, you have noticed a couple of things. You've noticed that her clothes are often too dirty and they're also too small. On one afternoon after training, she comes out of the changing room and you notice that she's been crying. And this is what she says to you. The other girls keep having a go at me and calling me smelly. They hold their noses when they're near me. Ruby's the worst. She's really mean. She always picks on me. And today she told the others that I'm a thief because she saw me taking food out of the bins. But it's not like I was nicking it. Mum doesn't get out of bed in the morning. There's never any food in our house, so we don't get breakfast. She spends more on booze than on food. My nan says that Mum doesn't take care of us properly. She gave my mum money to buy me a winter coat, but she bought vodka instead. It's cold walking to school. I think if my dad was still around, things would be different. Can I stay here for a while? Because Ruby says she'll be waiting for me when I come outside. Just pause the film now and jot down what you might say as an immediate response to Jacey. Okay, we've got some possible answers here. I wonder if yours matches any of these. So did you write, can you stop a moment so I can write this all down? Did you say, your mum's had a tough time, no wonder she forgets things sometimes? Did you say, there's someone I know who can help you with all of this? Or take as much time as you need to tell me all about it? You might have said, look, I haven't got time to sort this out now. Can we talk again next week? You might say, I can understand why you've been so upset. You might say, it's really good that you've told me about what is worrying you. Or you might say, let's go and talk to Ruby about what she's been doing. So there are some things on that list that we definitely would say that would be a really appropriate way of responding. And there are some things we'd say are not appropriate. Okay. And sometimes there's not a definitive right or wrong answer, but there are certainly some things that are not appropriate to say. So can you stop for a moment so I can write this all down? Would be very much what you might like to say, because in a moment when we go on to recording our concerns, you will realise how hard it is to write everything down. But the reason we don't say that is because it may stop a child from making a disclosure. If they feel suddenly it's all being recorded and very formal, it would put a child off and take away the flow of what they're saying. So that is definitely not something that we would say. Empathizing with the mum is a difficult one. We would say that that would not be an appropriate thing to say, although it might be something that you're able to do as somebody who's a parent. But by empathizing with the mum, you're kind of colluding. You're saying actually that the way mum's behaving is okay, and so that's something you need to be mindful of. So we would say not to do that. There's someone I know who can help you with all this is definitely something that we would encourage you to say. If you think back to the do's and don'ts of what we say in response, that would certainly be something we'd encourage you to be able to say, that you're going to pass this on to somebody who will be able to do something to help. Not having time to sort this out, no, that's definitely not something we would say. It has to go top of the priority list. Taking as much time as you need to tell me about it, that's a really supportive thing to say. It shows that you have got the time to listen. It shows that you're interested and that you care. I can understand why you've been so upset. That certainly is something that you could say, as long as it goes alongside the being able to pass it on. It's really good that you've told me what's worrying you. Again, really helpful thing to say. It shows that you acknowledge that it's been difficult for a child to share that. The final one is something that we talked about quite a lot in our volunteers training. Some felt that would be a really good thing to do. Others felt it wasn't an appropriate thing to do. I think our take of the school is that what the child is sharing isn't so much about Ruby as it is about the reason Ruby is behaving the way she is. And so it wouldn't be the first thing that we would do. We would certainly address that. And at the right time, we would talk to Ruby about that, possibly with Jacey, depending on the circumstances. But what we wouldn't want to do is feel that by taking that action and speaking to Ruby that we've dealt with the safeguarding problem, because Ruby isn't the safeguarding problem. Safeguarding problem is all the other things. So our gut feeling is that it's certainly something we would do, but not an immediate response to Jacey. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, so the referring on bit is important to talk about. If something has happened that has caused you concern, then referring it on to the designated safeguarding lead or somebody in their absence is really important. Sometimes you may feel unsure as to whether you should let somebody know or not. It might kind of just teeter on the brink. We say the answer to that is that you should always let somebody else know. If you have even the tiniest feeling that there might be something not quite right, then the right thing to do is always to pass it on. Referring is about getting the right people involved. It's not your role to decide whether further action is required. You're not responsible, but you are responsible for passing on the information that you have. And this last point is really critical. It might well be a missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle. We keep really careful records in school of any concerns that we have about children who come to our school. And very often it's about building up a picture over a period of time. Therefore, every little piece of the jigsaw puzzle is critical to getting the support that needs to be put into place in a timely fashion. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the part of the training relating to recording our observations. Quite a lot of information here for you to listen to, and then we're going to have a go at recording a concern based on another case study. So first of all, we're going to just go through what the recording must be, okay? We will show you, after we've gone through the ingredients of a good record, we will show you what our recording form looks like at Fishbourne Primary School too. And the recording forms are available in the staff room. They're available by the photocopier. Mrs. Martin, Sarah in the office have got a stack of them. You can ask for those or you can help yourself, okay? When we come to having a go, it will all kind of click into place as to what that looks like. But to start off with, our written records we know need to be clear, they need to be accurate, they need to be factual, complete, and appropriate. And we're going to take each of those in turn now to unpick what we mean by that a little bit more. So first up is clear. So we know that the record of concern that we write up must be really clear because it still needs to make sense 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, or many years from now, when you won't remember. In fact, you may no longer be volunteering at the school. We may not be able to get hold of you. So you won't have a memory of what was said, and you may not be able to recall what was said. So it's really important that your written record is clear. It needs to be understood by anyone who's reading it without you there to explain. It needs to have straightforward, clear, factual, correct language. After you've written it, we always recommend rereading it to check what you've recorded and sense check it. Always include full names, dates, and the date and time that the record is made. Sometimes there might be a delay between the child making a disclosure and the record being made of that disclosure. Good practice is that it happens straight away. And the reason for that is clear that as time passes, it's harder to remember what was said. Very occasionally, there might be a delay. For example, if you were out on a forest school session and you were away from the building and you didn't have any way of writing things down, there would be a delay between the child sharing something and you writing it down afterwards. Or if it's during a fire practice and you're not in the school building. But we do ask our staff team to prioritise safeguarding over everything else. And the shorter the time between an incident taking place and the record being made, the more likely it is that that information will be accurate. So records must be accurate. Get the information down in a timely way, this is what we said. Ensure that you provide sufficient detail. What happened, where it happened, when it happened, who was present, and how did the information come to light. Be specific with descriptions. So rather than saying a cut over the eye, try to make sure that you include all the information. A cut over the left eye that was approximately 3 centimetres long. Use a body map to record injuries. So the body maps go alongside the record of concern, and it's just a place where you're able to record on a silhouette of a body where those marks were, if there were any. Critically important, we never ever take photographs of children's injuries. And once you've written up your record, you will then check for any errors in the record. Your record must be factual. If it's appropriate for you to give an opinion about something, make sure that you clearly differentiate between what is factual and what might be a judgment that you have made. We never express an opinion about the validity of an allegation or disclosure made by the child. On our record sheets, which again we will share with you on the screen in a moment, there is a clear place for you to record the fact and the opinion, if the opinion is necessary. Okay. When I say opinion, I don't mean an opinion about whether or not something has happened, but I mean an opinion based around an interpretation of something that might be significant. So an example of that might be the child's made a disclosure, and your interpretation might be that you had noticed the child was particularly quiet during your reading session that day, or seemed to be a bit down in the dumps. So it's not you making a judgment, it is you noticing other things that may not have been said. Hopefully that's clear. If you need clarification about that, do ask. Where a child has made a disclosure, we always record this in the child's own words, even if the language is childlike. So that might include the use of swear words. It might include words that you wouldn't normally write down. And we use inverted commas or speech marks to show that that is the child's words where that is relevant. I think that comes in again further down, but we'll come back to that if we need to. Okay, so your records must be appropriate. So think carefully about your choice of language. A child's record may be read out as a part of a formal meeting or even in court. That almost sounds like it's the opposite of what we said on the previous slide. But what we mean about that is where you're writing any sort of interpretation, your professionalism in terms of how you write that is really important, because it may be read out again. So it would be absolutely inappropriate, and I'd be staggered if anybody did this at Fishbourne Primary School, but the use of any derogatory language to describe a child or any other person, any personal or irrelevant comments should not be used. It's important that you reflect on the way that you come across, the impression you give in the records that you write in terms of your level of professionalism. And of course, keeping the child at the centre of your record is really important too. Okay, and finally, records must be complete. So make sure you record what action you took. What we mean by that is what you did as a result of that. So it might be that you alerted the class teacher. It might be that you came and had a conversation with me and I asked you to write up a record for concern. On the forms, there's also a space for me to say what I did in response to that. So how I followed that up, what action I took as a result of that. Be clear about why you are recording this, as well as what you saw, heard, or did. If you speak to anyone else, record who you spoke to and the content of the discussion. And again, as your role as a volunteer in school, as is laid out in our code of conduct for volunteers, it is absolutely inappropriate for you to share your concern with anybody who is not a member of staff. Okay, and we talked about that in volunteer training, which is available on our school website. It's just not okay to talk with other parents, for example, about a safeguarding concern that was raised in school. And then finally, if you made a decision to take some form of action, record what you did and why, or who asked you to. Okay. So hopefully on the next slide, yeah, there we go. This is what our record of concern looks like at Fishbourne Primary School. And these are available, as I said, in the staff room and in the photocopier room, and Sarah has them in her office as well. And here you can see the information that we ask you to fill in. So you'll put in the child's name. Here it says the child's date of birth. You're unlikely to know that, and we can fill that in once you've completed your record of concern. The date of the concern and the name and job title of the person making the record. Okay, if you remember in a previous slide, we talked about there might be a difference between the date of the concern and the date and the time of making the record. And there are two places to complete that information. Hopefully they will be on the same day and close together in terms of time. But we do record that difference so that we have it for the purpose of the record. And then underneath that, we've got a place for you to write down the factual account of what happened and the prompts that we mentioned on a previous slide. What happened? Where did it happen? Who was there? And it says here, try to use the child's exact words, indicating with the use of speech marks. We're going to have a go at doing that, and you will see how difficult it is to be able to remember exactly what a child said. But there might be particular words that you are able to recall that the child used, and we'll explore that in our case study. And then, as I've already mentioned, any opinion or interpretation needed of that incident. And here you've got a space for the signature of the person making the record. The boxes underneath are boxes for me to fill out, where it explains here the name of the person taking the action, what the action was, and the result of that action. That's a really helpful place. This is the reflecting part of our safeguarding procedures in school, where we really stop and think carefully. I think the specific bit that I find very helpful as designated safeguarding leaders, reflecting on the result that that action has had. And very often we find we need to go back to something to ensure that the action taken there has been some result of that. And that is a really good prompt for us in school as part of our reflections. Okay, so this is our final case study that we're going to explore as part of this training. And this is our opportunity to think about how we make that record. So this is a case study involving a child called Ellie, and we want you to imagine that Ellie is making this disclosure to you as a member of the team at Fishbourne. If you remember, we never write anything down as we're listening, so think about a couple of things as you listen. I want you to think about what you might recognise as a possible sign of abuse, how you might respond to Ellie once she's finished talking, and what words you might use as part of your response. And then at the end of that case study, we want you then to make a note of those things as the disclosure is finished, before you then go on to write up your concerns. You've got 3 stages there. You're going to think about what you recognise as a possible sign of abuse, how you might respond to Ellie, and then you're going to think about what you would write down as your record of concern. I highly recommend pausing the film at the end of the case study before we then come back together. Okay, so Ellie, just find her case study and then we'll get started. Here we go. I don't want to go swimming anymore. I don't like Bill. He's the man on the bus that takes us. When he puts my wheelchair on the bus, he touches me on my private part. He said it felt nice. He asked if I liked it, but I don't. He told me to keep it a secret or I'd be in trouble. I said I don't like secrets and I'll tell on him. He said he'd call me a liar if I told, and then I'd get into trouble. He does it to Gracie too, but she doesn't like it either. When I said I was going to tell, he held my arm really tight and it hurt me. Will I get into trouble? Okay, so you're going to think about recognising those possible signs of abuse, what you're going to respond to Ellie, and then you're going to record the disclosure. Okay, so how did you get on with that? I think the feedback we've had from doing that activity in the past is that it's harder than it seemed. And one of the things that people felt was that they found it very difficult to record exactly what the child had said. We have talked a little bit about the words that really stood out in that case study, And the words for us that have stood out in the past are her referring to having been touched on the private parts. So we might write private parts in speech marks. The fact that he'd asked her to keep it a secret, and we might use the word secret. And those are the key words that stood out to us, and the rest of it we would be trying to summarize the content of what Ellie had said. In terms of how we responded to Ellie on that occasion, the final thing she said was, "Will I get into trouble?" And that is a great prompt for you to be able to respond to Ellie in terms of what you might say to her in response to that. You'd be able to reassure her that she won't get into trouble. You'll be able to reassure her that you will be able to pass that information on to somebody else who will be able to help. And then the first thing you would do is to refer it on to the designated safeguarding lead. So that's me or Emily or Catherine. And the first thing we would ask you to do is to sit down in a quiet space and to record what was said. Okay. Okay, we're coming towards the end. You're doing really well. Thank you for sticking with us during this time. We really hope it's helpful. And as I said before, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. So if you do have a concern, you are going to tell the DSL, designated safeguarding lead, you're going to follow our school policy, you're going to record your concern. It's really important that you act on those concerns, and it's really important that you don't wait until the end of the school day, or worse, go away and think about it and then come back the next day. In terms of making that referral on, one of the things that's also really important to know is that you can make the referral yourself. Very often we talk about referring to the designated safeguarding lead, who will then support you further as you go further on. But it's also important to know that you can make that referral yourself. Okay, so there are a number of options for that. Option one, if you feel a child is in immediate danger, is to call the police. Option two is contacting our local child protection services, who are known as Integrated Front Door now. Used to be called MASH, which stood for Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, but now the Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub has come together with Early Help and a number of other professionals to create Integrated Front Door. They have a telephone number there, they have an email address, and they also have a website. If you just put into a search engine, report a safeguarding concern for children in West Sussex, you'll be sent straight to that page. And interestingly, if you refer that way, you can do so anonymously, so you don't have to have your name associated with that disclosure. That's your choice. The other alternative is contacting the NSPCC helpline, and the contact details are there too, and they can also offer you advice. I would be really saddened to think you didn't feel able to talk to us in school, but it's really good to have a backup in the form of the NSPCC should you feel that you feel uncomfortable about talking to us as a school. They would be able to give you expert advice. Ultimately, the most important thing from our perspective is that the support is put into place to make sure that the safeguarding concern is removed. Whichever way you choose to go about doing that is absolutely fine. And so you've got three really good options there available to you beyond school. Sometimes staff say that they feel concerned about sharing their concerns, and that worries us in school a great deal, because we know that the number one priority is that we have a community in which we are able to share concerns. But these are some of the things that in the past, not at our school, but collectively, when things haven't been reported, these are some of the things that people say as to why. So sometimes people say that they feel there's nobody that they can talk to. Oh, this is, sorry, my mistake. This is in the case of our children who haven't disclosed. So children have said they felt that there's nobody that they're able to talk to, or who will listen to them, or who that they can trust. children fearing that they won't be listened to or understood, they won't be believed or taken seriously, that they have a over-reliance on themselves, that they sense that by telling people it's not going to make any difference, and that they might feel embarrassed. So those are things that children have said about why they haven't shared their worries in the past. And one of our jobs in school is to create a culture. One of the things it says in Keeping Children Safe in Education 2022 is that schools have got a duty to create an atmosphere and a culture in schools where children feel there is somebody that they can talk to, and if they talk to them, their concerns will be taken seriously. And volunteers, I do really strongly believe that you are exactly the sorts of people that children may make disclosures to, because you have that time with them, that special one-on-one time that means that they build a relationship with you over time and that they believe that they can talk to you. So you do need to be open to the fact that children may make a disclosure, and your role in safeguarding them becomes exceptionally important. Sometimes they may decide that they don't want to burden others with their worries, or that they might get somebody else into trouble, somebody who they love, and they don't want to get them into trouble. The adults might overreact, that they fear by sharing their concern, they no longer have any control over that situation. They don't know about who might be able to help, that there might be a stigma attached in social care. They might have had experiences of social care before, and certainly that's something that children have talked to us about before, that they don't want social care to become involved because they're wizened to the world and they know about those other services, and they may have had those experiences before. This is a really important reflection, that it is not the responsibility of professionals to decide whether or not child abuse has taken place, but it is the responsibility of professionals to report concerns. The worst thing that any of us can do is to do nothing. Sometimes when I've had to share concerns that we have in school with parents, that can be a really difficult conversation, a really challenging conversation. But one of the things that I'm always really clear about in my role in school is that it isn't my job to decide whether something has or hasn't happened, but it absolutely is my job to make sure that the right people are put into place to support the family to identify whether that has or hasn't happened. So, parting thoughts. Safeguarding and promoting the welfare of children at our school is everybody's responsibility. I can't do it by myself as designated safeguarding lead. It requires everybody to come together. Everybody who has contact with children and their families has a really important role to play. And in order to fulfill this responsibility effectively, all professionals and volunteers need to make sure that their approach centres around the child. This means that they should consider at all times what is in the best interests of the child. That takes us back to Sally at the Children's and Family Centre saying she doesn't want to rock the boat. That's not putting the children first. That's putting families and relationships with families first. It's really important that we hold the child at the centre of everything that we do. And that means both inside and outside school. All staff and volunteers have a responsibility to provide a safe environment in which our children can learn and flourish. All staff and volunteers should be prepared to identify children who may benefit from additional support and early help. Any staff member or volunteer who has a concern about a child's welfare should be able to follow the referral process. And that simply means filling in that cause for concern and passing it to the correct person. It can also mean, of course, making those decisions to take that action yourself by referring to the police, by referring to the integrated front door, or by referring to the NSPCC. Which brings us to our final slide. Thank you so much for sticking with us during this period of time. Thank you for being our everyday heroes. You make a tremendous difference by volunteering your time at our school, and we are hugely grateful to you for everything that you do. On this final slide, we've got a list of people who you can talk to if you need additional support or you've got a concern. We've mentioned everybody bar 2 people on this slide. So as you can see underneath the Deputy Designated Safeguarding Lead, we've also got Mrs. Lisa Harris, who's the head teacher at Rumbleswick, listed there. And she is also one of our designated safeguarding leads, should there be somebody missing and you're not able to talk to them at school. We also have a governor who has responsibility for safeguarding, and that's our chair of governors, Julie Barwell, who's also the person who you're able to talk to should you have a safeguarding concern, particularly if it relates to something that you may have seen in relation to a member of staff presenting a safeguarding concern to children at school. Okay, I'm going to draw it together there. You've taken on a lot of information. The last thing that I want to say is if you are a volunteer at our school and you have done this online training, we would like you to let us know that you have done that. You have hopefully received a copy of the Volunteers Handbook. If you haven't received that, please let us know and we will make sure you get a copy. In the back of that, there is a declaration form. It looks like this, okay? And it says on it a number of things that you need to sign to say that you have done. There are 4 things on that list: that you have received and read the Visitors and Volunteers Handbook, that you have read Part 1 of Keeping Children Safe in Education 2022, and that you understand your role of safeguarding, that you agree to support our school's aims and values, which are all outlined in the handbook, and that you agree to treat the information that you learn in school as confidential at all times. By signing that, you are saying that you have completed this training and that you are ready to fulfil your role of safeguarding at Fishbourne Primary School. Thank you so much for your time this morning. It's really, really appreciated. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you in school soon. Bye-bye.